Hi guys, my name is Sie and welcome back to the channel. So I'm just going to be talking about two books that I think you guys should all add to your reading list. And the first one is called We Need New Names by NoViolet Bulawayo. And NoViolet is a Zimbabwean born author, and she went and she studied in the United States. And I love this book because first and foremost it follows the story of a young girl, a 10-year-old Zimbabwean girl called Darling, and it just follows her life in Zimbabwe, and then after she leaves Zimbabwe and she goes to the United States to live with a relative. And during her time in Zimbabwe, you get to understand the environment that she was growing up in, and just in times of like political turmoil and poverty and displacement, because they live in a settlement and you learn that they never used to live there. It's kind of like a new thing where they were displaced from their old home and they had to move to the settlement, and they kind of have nothing now. And it's rooted, I think it's even rooted in the time of the last decade, and that was like a very crucial time in Zimbabwean history. And you can definitely look it up. And I think I love this book because, well, I love history, right? And I love reading pieces that are rooted at certain moments in time, because I think there's just so much more to the story, right? By understanding the characters, you get to understand the environment in which they were existing in, and it just makes the reading experience that much more richer, well, personally for me, right? But the one thing that I love the most is understanding such, I guess, uncovering such traumatic and such, I don't know how to put this, but uncovering such events through the perspective of a child or of children, because I think the voices of her friends are also very much a part of this narration, right? But focusing on kids, and usually, you know, like in our culture, kids don't necessarily have voices, like in most African contexts, right? Kids don't have voices. What they say doesn't matter. They have no understanding of the bigger picture. That's what we think, right? They have no understanding of the bigger picture, and they cannot relay information the way adults can relay information. That's what we tell ourselves. I'm not saying that's true. But by centering the voices of children in this book, I was like, what the hell? Because children are so honest. I believe children are so honest in their experiences of the world that even with what they say, they don't beat around the bush. They don't try to sugarcoat things. It's like they just drop a bomb. And there were moments in the book where it was like heavy content, right? But from the perspective of children. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot read this. There were moments where I was like so tensed up because it was just a hectic scene, and it was just amazing to read this book and from the kids' perspective. So, and then after that, Darling ends up leaving Zimbabwe, right? She ends up leaving to go, that's the second part of the book. She goes to live with a relative in the United States, and that part was just more exploring Darling's identity crisis and just tensions, and having experienced going away from home and living in another country, there is that separation, there is that anxiety, there is that loneliness and isolation that comes with trying to navigate who you are as a person in foreign lands, right? And you're constantly reminded of your foreign identity, and whereas you've never had to confront that before, right? And it does something to the soul, I don't know, but just, yeah. And I related to that aspect of Darling's life because I felt like I had to deal with some of the things that she deals with in the book. So I think Violet Bulawayo does a good job in exploring the life of an immigrant, particularly in the United States, right? And the challenges that you face, the separation from friends and family, and how that can even result in loss of connection. And so it's a really good book, and I think everyone should explore it. The second book I wanted to talk about is Refuge by Dina Nayeri, and it follows the story of a girl called Nilo, a woman at the point where the story starts. She's a woman called Nilo, and she was born in Iran, but she migrated to the United States of America, where she was granted asylum, where her and her family were granted asylum, right? And it's like the journey of it narrates the journey of refugees. Like, I think she first her family, when they left Iran, they went to Amsterdam, Italy, and at some point they were in the UAE, and then they arrived in the United States, where they managed to seek asylum and were granted asylum, right? And by focusing on the refugee journey, I think it does a good job of exploring the immigration practices and asylum practices of multiple different countries, especially even like looking at the refugee crisis, particularly focusing in the Netherlands, right? And just looking at people's reception and perceptions of refugees through the life of Nilo as she navigates different spaces and occupies different spaces, right? She goes to Yale, but also like her refugee identity is very stark even there. And just as she tries to go through the world and search for home, I guess. There's also the theme of family separation, just like in NoViolet Bulawayo's book, where Nilo's dad remained in Iran, right, after they left. So he remained in Iran, and he remarried like multiple times, and in 22 years, I believe, she had only seen her father 4 times. And she used to be a big daddy's girl, so she's now in her adult years, they're trying to kind of rekindle that relationship and not sure how to go about doing it because Nilo has changed and transitioned so much. So I think she does a very good job of just exploring the idea of home, the ideas around identity and belonging, and also just family separation and religion as well, because I think Nilo's parents had to leave Iran because her mom had converted into Christianity and had converted them into Christianity, and they started being targeted because, as we know, Iran is Muslim. So they left. That's why they decided to leave, because they were part of a marginalized group, and they were being targeted. And I think on those grounds they were able to receive asylum from the United States, because I think when you seek asylum, it has to be like there's 4 tiers. And I know this because I worked for an immigration law firm for a short while, but there's like 4 tiers, and it's either your life is in danger because of your political beliefs or your religious identity, or you're part of like a minority group or like a marginalized community. So this could include like being gay, lesbian, and being a woman in some cases. And or like a gang is after you and things like that. They're very like strict on the grounds on which you can apply for asylum, right? And you have to show a real threat of danger, which is just So I think there's all those conversations that are being unpacked in the book through the story of Nilo, and I just think it's a good book to have in your reading list. Both these books are really good to have in your reading list, and so do read them, do check them out. I really enjoyed reading them. I will say though that I found Dina Nayeri's book, it took me longer to read because I started it and then I kind of lost interest somewhere in the middle, and I started NoViolet's book, and then I finished that, and then I went back to Dina Nayeri's. So I would say, just in terms of readability, it requires you to pay more attention, and sometimes I read like passively, and that would throw me off because I wouldn't know what was happening. Whereas NoViolet Bulawayo's book, I think, is very straightforward and it's easy to read and understand. Also, maybe it's I'll just say that. So yeah, but I still do think it's a very amazing book, and it does deserve that bestseller award situation. So yeah, do check those books out, guys, and if you do, please let me know what you think of them. I would love to have more conversations around this. Thank you guys so much for watching my videos. Like, comment, subscribe. Yeah.